All right, today we're going to walk around the avenues of Salt Lake City. This is the neighborhood I grew up in. I was born and raised in this neighborhood. It's one of the nicest neighborhoods in Salt Lake, in my opinion. And it is just incredibly gorgeous today. I actually do not have a sweatshirt on for the first time since probably October. Some kind of jacket at least. Yeah, it's gorgeous, gorgeous today. As you can see, a lot of the snow on the mountain is starting to melt. It's about half melted. The fear now is flooding because there's so much snow on the mountains that if it all comes down at once, that's what happened in 1983 in Salt Lake. Is it was a super, super snowy winter, and then, in May it was in the 80s, and all that snow just came rushing down the mountain. But I don't think it's going to be like that this year. They've put in a lot more flood mitigation in the valley, and it is only April. And we're supposed to get a couple really warm days here, but then it's supposed to go a little back to, the 50s, low 60s, which is pretty normal for this time of year. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we don't get any flooding, because that is not fun, especially after the winter we had. I think everybody is excited to be outside. We're just going to do a short walk today, probably 30 minutes. Just walk around. I just could not take advantage of this amazing day. The Avenues has a lot of really cool old houses. Really nice fixed up old houses. It's one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city. I think it might actually be the oldest neighborhood in the entire city. And, when Utah was first started as a state, this is where all the dignitaries and all the people high up in government lived, was in this neighborhood a little lower. And then they just kept building up and up the mountain. And now the Avenues goes pretty high up. But most of that houses on the higher end are newer because they just didn't build them until later. But some of these, there's just some beautiful houses. Lots of nice porches. I could never afford this neighborhood anymore. And, my parents still live here. They could never afford this neighborhood now. But they bought their house in 1988, so it's been, property values have, needless to say, absolutely skyrocketed since then, especially in this neighborhood. But yeah, I know these streets well. I grew up here, walked this many times. We'll walk over. There's a graveyard a few blocks away, which is a pretty cool little graveyard I'd like to show you. So we'll walk over there, check that out a little bit. The good thing about the Avenues is that it's very kind of a quiet neighborhood. There's only a couple really busy streets, maybe 3 really busy streets. But other than that, it's very quiet, very nice. A lot of families, not so many as there used to be. I just don't think that families can afford really to live here anymore. But there are still a lot of families, and a lot of people really take care of their houses up here. You're not going to find a whole lot of rundown houses. This one on the corner here we'll look at, it's really nice. I like the way that they painted this house. I get up here, but see, it's like a bluish gray kind of color. Really pretty. I like it. And that's a historical house. There's a lot of historical houses in the Avenues, and you'll see a little historic placard. It'll tell you if somebody famous lived there, or somebody from Utah history, Salt Lake City history lived there a long time ago, what year it was built, stuff like that. My parents' house is pretty old. I think theirs was built in the late 1800s. It's small, but they have 2 entrance doors, in the front of the house. One is boarded up, but you can still see the inside portion of it. You just can't access it. It's bricked up. But I mean, I think that I heard that the reason that they did this was that when polygamous families lived in the house, lived in the avenues, the man and the very first wife that he married, could walk through the front door, the first door that they built when they were entering or exiting the house. But all the other wives and all of the kids had to enter through the second door. I don't know. I can't confirm 100% if that's true, but I've heard that multiple places, so I don't know. Take that what you will. Kind of an interesting fact, though. It's a cute house right here. Houses in this neighborhood, I would say in the low end, are about $500,000. That's the low end. And then you're getting up to the higher Avs. You know, you're looking at $1 million, $1.5 million, you know, depending. Some can go up as high as probably $4 or $5 million in the high end of the avenues. But that neighborhood looks a lot different than this. A lot of, like I said, newer houses, more modern homes. Stuff that was built just in the last, 10, 20 years, 30 years. So, and some of the ones down here are more modern, but it seems like they tend to keep the same kind of architectural style as the older homes, which I think is nice too, because it kind of keeps that same neighborhood vibe. I am almost hot, guys. Like, I am walking around here. It's probably 65 or 66 degrees, and I am just have a t-shirt on and I'm pretty hot. But I believe that that's just because once you get done, with that long winter where you're cold all the time, even warm feels hot. I like it. I'm not complaining at all. I'm definitely excited for the spring and summer. We'll do a lot more walks, lots of camping, lots of concerts. So you're going to get plenty more content from me this summer. More nice houses up here. You can see how pretty a lot of this stuff is. These houses are very well taken care of. If you have the money to buy a house in the avenues in 2023, you definitely have the money to fix whatever's wrong with it. As this neighborhood is extremely expensive. A good shot of the mountains right there. You can see that they're mostly still snow covered, especially at the top. There's a lot of snow, but the middles and the bottoms, it's starting to melt. Just 2 days ago, it looked like those mountains were completely covered with snow, and now it's like about halfway up on some of them. It might be one of those winters where some of the snow at the real high elevations doesn't melt at all over the summer and just stays until next winter. We haven't had one of those in a long time. And I know the ski resorts are planning to be open, some of them through Memorial Day, which is insane. It's good for them, good for the economy, and good for people who like to ski and snowboard. You can go snowboard on Memorial Day and then come down and cook your barbecue. That's crazy. Anyway, we're coming up in a little bit, about a half block. We got this cool graveyard that has been in here forever. I used to run around when I was a kid and play in this graveyard. And then when we were teenagers, we would do, more nefarious stuff in there, drink beer and other things. And there was a guy that I don't think that he still runs the cemetery, but there was a family that ran the cemetery. I'll show you the house that the cemetery caretaker lives in. They ran it, and they found you in the graveyard after dark, or after it closed. I think it closes at dusk. Then they would, if you ran from them, they would shoot you with a gun that had salt pellets in it. And man, those things sting. I don't know how, I guess that was the 90s. I don't know how they got away with doing something like that, but we just never said anything. There's no way you could do anything like that now as a private citizen, as not a police officer or a law enforcement officer. But yeah, it was this gun loaded with salt pellets, and those things hurt. So it's like they're doing a little remodel on this house down here. A lot of these houses have mother-in-law apartments or basement apartments. They're like built that way. When my parents moved into this neighborhood in the late 70s, early 80s, it was not the nicest neighborhood. It was just starting to kind of get its foothold. There were a lot of run-down houses. It just was not considered the nicest neighborhood. And then through the 80s into the 90s, it started really becoming nice, and they made some laws that you can't build any housing structure over 2 stories. So you'll see there are a few in the avenues that are 5 or 6 stories, condominiums, but there's only maybe 4 or 5. And the reason for that is that they made that law, and so they have not been able to build any since the early 90s, I believe, which is a good thing. So we're going into the cemetery here, the Walkway of Hope. That's the house that the caretaker lives in, and I highly doubt they have the same caretaker they did when I was a kid, because I was in the 90s and I'm old, so he would have to be really old. But I always thought that would be kind of an interesting job, you know. I'm sure that they get to live there for free, or else at least it's very, very low rent. And you just live in the cemetery, and then you're the caretaker of the cemetery. Your family, I remember the caretaker had a family, and I saw kids in that house. I saw a wife, I believe. So it'll be kind of interesting. I mean, you're going to sleep every night in the cemetery, basically. I guess you got to kind of be a certain kind of person for that type of job. It's probably good work. Like I said, not a lot of living expenses, depending on probably what you negotiate. This is an old cemetery. This has been here for a long time. You'll see some gravestones in here from a long time ago. A lot of them have been replaced, the older ones. But like if you see this one, 1860 and 1905. See, there's a picture, old picture of the person who's buried here. And this looks like it could be the original headstone. Now this is definitely the original headstone. It looks like the placard has been replaced, because that's a newer placard. And it has a little thing on it that says 1997, so I bet that placard was replaced in 1997. But this gravestone is definitely the original, and that would be 1882 at the latest, probably 1858 was when the first person, looks like 4 people are buried here. And then like there's stuff like this one is so old that you can't really even see the date anymore on it. Looks like Robert Griffith, or Griffith Roberts. I think it is Griffith Roberts, but it's so faded down there that you can't really see any date anymore. But that is definitely the original headstone. So there's a lot of these in this cemetery. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is the oldest cemetery in Utah, and I'm 99% sure that I'm not wrong about that. When we were young, there was a grave out here, supposedly Emo's grave, which I've heard a lot of stories that there's Emo's graves all over the place, but it was a grave's head. I'm not sure if it's still here, but it had a window and it had like an urn in it. And there was always the rumor that if you went at night and you looked in that window, you would see the ghost of whoever lived there. Or whoever was buried there, I mean. But I think that happens at a lot of cemeteries, especially older ones, and especially with teenagers. Because, you know, teenagers are like that. We're going to walk through this whole graveyard and then we're going to go back the other way. Oh, it's Easter Sunday, so happy Easter if you celebrate. Easter to me has always kind of been like a renewal, spring renewal. That's when it's really spring. I'm not a religious person at all, but I like Easter as kind of a renewal time. Kind of looks like, you know, it's when everything starts blooming, and that's when spring really kind of comes. We'll let this car pass, but you can see this graveyard. This gravestone is from 1872. John McCullough. Alice C., wife of John McCullough of Toledo, Ohio. Born March 18th, 1847. Died January 17th, 1872. And also the daughter, Zena M.B., daughter of the above, born January 12th, 1872, died February 6th, 1872. So she was just tiny. It's interesting to me, the life expectancy of people and how much it's changed even in the last 100 or so years. Because that woman on the graveyard that we just read, she was only in her late 30s. And then her baby was just tiny. So I think that I know the infant mortality rate was a lot higher back then. But I also know that a lot of people only made it, you know, a couple decades into adulthood. Times were a lot tougher back then. It really kind of makes you appreciate now, you know, with all the modern medicine and the lifestyle that most of us are allowed to live now is a lot better than it was back then. Still rough for a lot of people. I'm not taking anything away from that, because I recognize that there are a lot of people that have rough lives, even in this country. But, and compared to what people were facing in the late 1800s, it was, have a lot of stuff to be thankful for. Kind of the way I see it. And the one I'm most thankful for today is how gorgeous it is outside, how nice this day is. Top of this cemetery, we're not going to walk up there today, but at the very top of this cemetery is the Veterans Cemetery. So just hundreds and hundreds of little white tombstones from those that we lost, local Utahns and local people that we lost in World War II. I believe that they have a section for the Korean War as well, but I'm not positive. But yeah, this cemetery is very, very big. I'm not sure exactly how many acres, but it's big. Yeah. I got another cool old grave up here. Stephen Hansen. November September 7th, 1856 to, it looks like, April 5th, 1893. So he was not even 40. He was 37 years old. Mr. Stephen Hansen. Rocks on the top of a lot of these graves. I'm wondering if that's a superstitious thing or if it's like a memorial thing. Somebody let me know if you can in the comments, because I'm not sure why. I've seen several rocks on several different tombstones. Looks like that there's a Jewish section over here. You can see some Star of Davids on these. Igor Lovich, and then Trossman. All of these four all have Star of Davids on them. So that's cool. That's kind of a Jewish section. There's not a huge Jewish community in Salt Lake, but there is a strong one. There are not a lot of them, but they are very strong and they have a very good presence here. There's a Jewish community center pretty near here, and they have one of the highest rated preschools in the entire state. Lots of really wealthy people pay a lot of money to put their kids in that preschool. And I've known people who've had their kids in there and said that they do a great job. So yeah, the Jewish community is pretty strong for as small as it is, which is good to see. You always like seeing, with the predominant religion here, you always like seeing other religions kind of make their mark that aren't just the LDS religion. And you probably can't hear it, but I can hear the snow melt and hear the gutters. We're going to be hearing the gutters for quite a while. There is, like I said, a lot of snow melt. You can see that where the trees are, where they get a lot of shade, there's still a little bit of snow. Although I would imagine most of this will be gone by the end of tomorrow. And there's a bunch of big right there, but there's these big, huge pine trees here too that line this side of the street. So these are under shade. This grass and those graves are under shade most of the day. So that's why they still have some snow. Because there has not been a single cloud in the sky again today. Like I said, I am sweating under my hat. And I just have a t-shirt on and I am roasting right now. Well, we're getting our cardio in for the day, right? That's one of my 4 C's on my channel, so we're definitely getting that in. I haven't gotten to go on a run in a while. I'll probably go on one on Wednesday after work. It's gonna be a little too hot the next couple days. Gotta get used to this heat. So we're kind of at the end of the graveyard. I don't want to go over any grass, so I'm gonna turn around and head back the way I came. Wow, very dense in this area of the grave. There's just grave after grave after grave. It's funny because there's a lot of some spread out area where there's not a lot of graves, like over here. And there's some in the ground that you can't see, but there's also some places where there are no grave heads. But like over here, it's just non-stop. There's a path down here and a gate, but I don't think that gate is open. But I do know that the one right over here is open. So I am going to go out of this graveyard and go on the other side of the street. Bored. Kind of interesting. Yeah, there's rocks everywhere, all over these graves. Little rocks. So I'm not sure why. It's got to be some kind of memorial or something, some superstitious thing that people do. So yeah, if anyone knows, let me know. It's very interesting. And you can see it's mid-April almost, and there's still no buds on the trees, which is very unusual. And that has to do with just the incredible amount of snow that we had this winter and how late it came in. I mean, a week ago, less than a week ago, Sunday, on Tuesday, this area would have had 18 inches of snow on the road. All right, this is locked too. I'm gonna climb over because I really don't feel like going all the way out to the end part. We'll cross the street after this car goes. We'll go down. We'll walk on the other side of the street here, so I can kind of show you the other side. A lot of people out walking their dogs today, as to be expected. Getting runs in, just enjoying this gorgeous Easter Sunday. Lots of dogs in this neighborhood. Always. Oh, ooh. Those dogs did not like that dog that was walking. They are not having a good time. It is what it is. Look at that car. Oh yeah. Sunday is lowrider day. It really is. One of these days in the summer, I'll take you down to the big park in Salt Lake, and there's lowriders every